welcome the announcement of the movement of the writ for the by-election. I can assure the House that the Fianna Fáil party will be positive and will have a constructive debate, looking forward to a constructive debate about the future of the people in the Meath East constituency itself and, of course, the country generally. We will put forward concrete, constructive ideas and proposals on what we can do to tackle the major issues that face the people in Meath East. We have selected our candidate, Senator Thomas Byrne. I think he will provide a strong, a challenging and constructive voice in Dáil on behalf of the people of Meath East. He's constantly working to address the needs of Meath communities. He understands that serving local needs is not a duty of office, but indeed a great privilege and a great honour. He understands the challenges that families are facing, being a young family man himself. He has real ability and makes a real impact on the national stage. I think if you look at the period that Thomas Byrne has served in the Shannon, for example, if you look at his legislative input, he has brought forward bills in terms of the Family Home Protection Bill as part of our finance team, in terms of the Debt Settlement Office Bill to help people in mortgage arrears. Unfortunately, many of these suggestions haven't been taken on board, but it does illustrate the constructive approach he takes to politics. So I think he has demonstrated that he's a constructive and effective legislator, and it's in that context that we have confidence in him and faith in him in putting him forward as a candidate. He's spoken very much on what is an unfair property tax being promoted by the government. He's articulated alternatives. He's articulated alternatives to that, and he's illustrated how it does not have to be introduced, and he's provided alternatives to that. He is an excellent candidate. I didn't interrupt anybody on any side of the House. He's an excellent candidate, and I think he would be a very welcome voice in Dáil Éireann for common sense policy. Yes, the campaign will, as the Tánaiste has said, be one for a whole range of issues. And we will be reminding people that this is a government and political parties in the government of many, many broken promises, such as, for example, people will remember Rory Quinn on the steps of Trinity College promising to students that he would reduce student fees and that he wouldn't increase them. People will remember also people will also remember the very clear and sincere commitment made by Tánaiste that if you voted for Labour, there would be no cut to child benefit. And that will be, there are many other areas where promises were made and were deliberately broken by the government. We believe that mortgage arrears, that personal debt, that access to services are very significant issues, and youth unemployment as well. And if you look at, the live register has increased by 2.5% in Meath alone in the last while. Youth unemployment is a huge challenge now to the commuter belt area, to the towns of Kells, Dunboyne, Ratoath, Dunshaughlin, Ashburn, Duleek and Slane. And crime is a very, very significant issue which is causing a lot of anxiety and fear for people across that constituency and across the country. Burglaries have risen by 28.3%, and the response so far has been to close Garda stations and to contribute to the lowest morale ever witnessed among our Garda Síochána. Could I also say that one of the most fundamental points, and the Tánaiste talked about choice, this government has an unprecedented and an overwhelming majority. We have seen as late as today how it has abused that majority, how it has rammed through important legislation without allowing any opportunity for debate whatsoever, and how it has not taken the opportunity of that very significant majority to radically change the way we do politics in this country, how Parliament is constructed and operates, as it promised to do at the time of the election, as every party promised to do. And today again, a property tax bill, the first one before Christmas, only 3 out of 88 amendments were taken. And today, 2.5 hours this evening, no chance to table amendments, no chance to discuss amendments. It's just been rammed through.
Thank you, Deputy.
Why? So the Revenue can send the letters out on Monday and Tuesday. That's how insignificant the government thinks Parliament is now, and how irrelevant the government thinks Parliament is.
Thank you.
So I would make that fundamental point. The government doesn't need an addition to its overwhelming majority, because it's abusing that majority day in and day out. Thank you, Councillor.
Deputy Jerry Adams. Sorry, would you please settle down, would you? And I've called Deputy Jerry Adams without interruption. I won't, and that includes you, Deputy. No, Deputy Adams.
I can't go into Taoiseach. I want to welcome the setting of March the 27th for the Meath East by-election, but I'm very mindful of the McEntee family who are still in mourning, who are still grieving, and I want again to pay tribute to the work and to the life of the late Shane McEntee. Indium les and Medj Durtu, we Shane, Chuck the Dáil go Huntake, Far Macanta, August Gohan Cardwell. The tragic circumstances, I suppose everybody here wishes we weren't having this by-election in the circumstances that it has to be held, and I certainly have that very strong view of it. Our candidate is Darren O'Rourke. He's the only candidate who stands outside the consensus for austerity, the consensus of Fianna Fáil and of Fine Gael and of Labour. And I do think that, despite the very tragic circumstances, that this will be an opportunity for people to make a verdict, to give a verdict on the government, but more importantly, to vote positively for the type of policies they thought that this government was going to bring in when they elected you away 2 years ago. Because what people did in 2011 was to vote for change. They voted to get rid of what they saw as a very bad government, and they believed the promises that were made, promises which were torn up very, very quickly. And I do think that Meath East, just as it's a convergence of all that happened. A lot of young families moved out from the capital, bought up homes at huge prices, are now in mortgage distress, are living, some of them, in townships without proper schools, without structure, without infrastructure. And I only hope that citizens take this opportunity to vote very, very positively in this election and to vote for Sinn Féin and for Darren O'Rourke. Gora Margaret.
I now call on Deputy Catherine Murphy.
Thank you. I want to welcome the moving of the writ today, and I think we've seen the last of the protracted delays that were a feature of the past in terms of calling by-elections, and I think that's very much part of a product of the court ruling in the case of the case taken by Pearse Doherty. I was elected in a by-election on the same day as the late Shane McEntee in March 2005, a day both of us held in fond memory and often exchanged different experiences after that date. While by-elections will focus on what candidate might and might not get elected, they're also dominated by issues that maybe otherwise wouldn't come to the fore. There were great similarities in 2005 in the two by-elections, in that both were in what was termed later as commuter belt areas. The neglect of the rapidly developing areas, together with the challenges of a disproportionately young population, were very much prominent. The lack of affordable and available childcare, the time people were spending commuting to work, and the lack of infrastructure and support services for new communities all dominated. And that was the agenda that I know Shane McEntee worked to, because it was the agenda that was set by the people of Meath East. But it's an agenda that is a very, very much non-finished agenda. By-elections differ greatly from general elections, where people first and foremost will concentrate on electing a government, seen as a first-string election, where they feel that they have a lot more freedom in a by-election, and it's often much more difficult to call the result because there's an emotional content. For example, the sad and untimely death of Shane McEntee may play a part, and I think it goes without saying that no one in this House would want a by-election in these circumstances. Those by-elections were about replacing Charlie McCreevy and John Bruton, and it was a very different context. But there are times and there are other emotions, and we're in different times, and we're certain to see different emotions come to the fore on this occasion. For example, the stress some individuals and families due to job losses, or the inadequate income to pay a mortgage, or other bills will go unpaid, undoubtedly will feature and will prompt a response, I believe, in the polls. Commuter belt areas tend to be poorer in terms of the service delivery. For example, Meath boasts one of the poorest ratio of Gardaí to population, very similar to Kildare, which is actually the lowest. The staff in local government is the lowest nationally, which produces a lower and weaker level of service. Frontline services delivered by the HSE are often disproportionately worse. So it's difficult to see how the like of the Croke Park Agreement won't influence those who deliver the services and those who struggle to acquire the services, and they will be part of the agenda of this election. There is also an irony about today where the debate is being limited and there's a guillotine being placed on the property tax bill in order to allow the revenue commissioners to deliver yet another financial burden on households in Meath East and elsewhere. Those bills are likely to drop through the letterbox together with election material from the various candidates. It's hard to see how that won't feature as a major issue, particularly in households who are up to their tonsils in debt and, because of the recent large-scale development in Meath East, may have forked out huge sums of stamp duty which will not form part of the expected exemptions. It's going to be seen as an opportunity to make a statement on the performance of government mid-term. By-elections always are. This by-election will be about a clash of emotions. One will centre around the fondness and the undoubted fondness and respect for the McEntee family, but the other set of emotions will be about the anger, the regret and the hopelessness felt by so many about the direction that this government has taken. I want to wish all candidates well, but at the end of the day, it's the people of Meath East that are sovereign, and they'll decide who's the replacement for Shane McEntee in this House. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. The question is that the motion be agreed to. Is that agreed? Agreed. The next item, Private Members Bill, Poor Relief Ireland Amendment Bill 2013. I call on Deputy Paudie Coffey to move for leave to introduce the bill. Deputy Coffey? Is the bill being opposed? Not opposed. Not opposed. I declare the motion for leave to introduce agreed. Since this is a private members' bill, second stage must under standing orders be taken in private members' time. Perhaps the Deputy would move that the second stage be taken in private members' time. That agreed? Agreed. Next item, Finance Bill 2013, allocation of time motion for select subcommittee. I call on the Minister to move. Move. The motion agreed to? Agreed. Agreed. Next item is Finance Bill 2013, financial resolutions. I call on the Minister to move the motions together, then immediately put the question that the financial resolutions 1 to 42 inclusive be agreed to. Would you please move? Move. Is that agreed? Agreed. Agreed. Finance Local Property Tax Amendment Bill 2013, financial resolution. Again, I call on the Minister to move. The motion be agreed. Is that agreed? Agreed. Motion proposed approved by Dáil, Éireann of a proposal that Section 17A of the Diseases of Animals Act 1966 shall continue in force for the period ending on the 8th of March 2014. Call on the Minister for Agriculture, Food and Marine to move the motion. The motion agreed? Can we make any comment? No, sorry, it's without debate. We now move on to topical issues. There we go. We got to
The first topical issue is in the name of Deputy Sean Kine, and it's the need to publish the scientific research as well as responses by BIM to queries regarding EIS on the environmental impact of the proposed salmon fish farm in Galway Bay off the coast of Éireann, and to address all concerns. Deputy, you have 4 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I'd like to firstly thank the Can Coder's office for selecting this topical issue, and I'd like to welcome Minister Coveney to the Chamber to debate this very important issue. I appreciate the very heavy workload that the Minister has at the moment in terms of his work on CAP reform in Brussels, and I appreciate him taking time on this very important issue. I accept the bona fides of the Minister in terms of this project and the job creation potential of a project such as this, and the potential for growth within the organic salmon industry. And I'm sure the Minister is aware of the concerns that have been portrayed locally in a march last Saturday, but also an amount of communication that we've had over the last number of months. And I know that BIM and local angling groups have made presentations to various local authorities in Galway City and County, and have met with a number of Oireachtas members, including myself. The concerns are numerous. I suppose issues regarding sea lice and the effect that they would have on the native salmon and trout smolts within the river systems, such as the Spiddle, Cashla, Costello, Kilcolgan and Carden Bridge, and of course the Corb river systems. Concerns regarding escapees that might occur from such a large salmon farm, with over 7 million salmon being planned at its peak, and also issues regarding pollution from such a farm, and also the impact on local angling. And as you know, Connemara and Galway is renowned for its angling, and Lough Corrib being the largest lake in the Republic, a hugely important industry for us. Imahúram tá ceistin a fós le freagar cuaidiú leis an firm éisio, má tain sé ará bai sé ceann na firmacha éisc is mós in Europe. Agus tá is agam go mbeidh postanna a chruthú, céibhéid ní cínse ach mbeidh postanna go bhór ó tíomh próiseáil agus is maithan rud é sin do Connemara. Ach tá imní ar íscarí agus chomhlachtaí íscadóireacht faoi trúlú, faoi mílta mara agus ar implicétaí ar éisc féin. Tastíonn freagraí ar ceistena ó grúpaí íscadóirí a Connemara agus Gaillimh go luath. The view of inland fisheries has been expressed also, and they've given the view of the board. They've indicated that they have concerns about the location and scale of the proposed salmon farm, how its development and operation could impact on wild salmon and sea trout stocks and their habitat, and that their concerns are based on scientific reports by respected authors and knowledge of the impact of existing fish farms on salmon and sea trout populations off the west coast of Ireland. They view that sea lice would have devastating effects on wild salmon, accounting for up to 39% of salmon mortalities, and that's from recent peer-reviewed international scientific literature. They've also concerned that the associated loss of jobs in the recreational, angling and tourism sectors if this development proceeds without adequate environmental protections in place. What I'm asking, Minister, is that you publish the responses from BIM to your department in relation to local groups' queries and concerns regarding the EIS. I think that we need transparency on all issues, and this is one of those where I think it would allay the fears and concerns and allow local groups, whether it be anglers or the IFI or whoever else, individuals, to know exactly what BIM are applying to before any decision is made. Because I appreciate you ultimately, you and the department will have to make this issue. You will be getting advice, I understand, from the Marine Institute, or they will certainly be giving a lead opinion as well. But I think it's important that the scientific responses or the responses to the scientific facts be known and be presented.
Thank you, Deputy Minister. You have 4 minutes to respond.
Thank you, Garda. I see aquaculture as a crucial component of the Government's Food Harvest 2020 strategy. To expand the production of Irish organic farmed salmon, I tasked BIM to investigate the creation of new fish farming production areas in deeper waters. The placement of farms in deep waters is designed to ensure that there is no impact on Natura 2000 sites, no significant environmental or visual impact, and no interference with migratory salmonoids, wild sea fisheries, navigation, or indeed tourism interests. BIM has estimated that just one of these production areas could generate over €100 million in exports per annum and create about 350 direct jobs. A further 150 jobs will be created indirectly in the service sector, supplying fish feed, netting, transportation and other services. Last year, BIM submitted an application to my department for an aquaculture licence for the cultivation of fin fish near Inishowen in Galway Bay. The application and its accompanying environmental impact statement is being considered under the provisions of the 1997 Fisheries Amendment Act and the 1933 Foreshore Act, which provides for extensive consultation with stakeholders and also for a period of general public consultation. The public consultation stage of the assessment process in respect of the application is now closed, and a total of 410 valid submissions were received by my department. All aspects of the Galway Bay application are currently being examined by my department in conjunction with its scientific, engineering, technical and legal advisors. All submissions received as part of both the statutory consultation stage of the process and the general public consultation stage will form an integral part of my department's consideration of the application. It is important to note that the legislation provides for extensive consultation with stakeholders, including Inland Fisheries Ireland, which has responsibility for wild salmon stocks. It is important for deputies to understand that as the application is under active consideration as part of the statutory process, it would not be appropriate for me to comment on the merits or otherwise of the application, pending the completion of the formal assessment process by my department. The application process is governed by legislation and must not be subject to parallel discussions by me as Minister or my department, which could be misconstrued as indicating a predisposition by my department in respect of the application. Of course, no such predisposition exists, and the formal assessment process will take into account and evaluate all of the observations received from stakeholders and the general public in relation to the application, as I have a responsibility to do. It should also be noted that the legislation provides for a possible appeal of the ministerial decision to the Aquaculture Licences Appeals Board, an independent authority for the determination of appeals against decisions of the Minister. I can assure deputies that the public interest is well protected under the provisions of the relevant legislation, and I am very conscious of the importance of proceeding fully in line with the statutory requirements, given the scale and ambition of this particular proposal.
Thank you, Minister. You have 2 minutes, Deputy, for a supplementary.
Thank you, and I thank the Minister for his reply, although I appreciate it is constrained due to the active nature of the application, and I appreciate that he cannot comment on the ins and outs of the application. But I suppose, unfortunately, there is widespread concern in the locality about this. And again, I'd have to repeat my view that the responses to the queries pertaining to the application from BIM should be published. I think that would give put all the information out there and enable everybody who has a concern, the IFI, local angling groups, people who are involved in tourism who have a genuine concern about the possible impact of such a large-scale project. If they had that information and they had the responses, they would be better able to judge whether all the facts are there or whether all the facts are correct. I firmly believe in facts, and when BIM tell me that 90% of the salmon smolts that come out of the river catchments travel along the coastline up onto the North Atlantic, and yet local angling groups in the IFI say 90% of the same salmon smolts swim deep into Galway Bay. Which is the correct piece of advice? I believe that facts should be facts; they should be indisputable. And unfortunately, we're getting two sets of facts on something that needs to be known before any decision is made. So I think it's imperative that all the scientific data is fully out there, fully assessed, and that people are confident that before a decision is made, that everything is open and transparent and looked at.
Thanks, Deputy Minister. Do you want to respond?
Yeah, no, thank you. And I understand that there is a concern in relation to this project by some, and there are also many who are very supportive of the project. When you are doing something new in Ireland, you always get concerns expressed, and that is the way it should be. And that is why we have a procedure that we need to follow. And we're following that procedure, which is consistent with the legislation. And I will take the advice of my department and also, in particular, the advice of the marine scientists and marine biologists in the Marine Institute in relation to this application, as I do for other aquaculture and finfish farming applications, as and when they arise. And it is important that we apply the same standards to this project as to others. And so we will follow the procedure to the letter. I know that BIM are making their case for this particular project, and they have been actively trying to do that through public meetings, through information sessions and so on. But ultimately, I must separate myself from the project to the extent that I need to make an independent decision based on the submissions that have been made of concern, and also the advice that I get from scientists that I pay to give me that advice in the Marine Institute. And when I get those recommendations from the top marine biologists and marine scientists in the country in terms of the questions and concerns that have been raised, well, then I'll make a decision accordingly on the back of that information. I hope to be able to do that in the not too distant future. Of course, if people disagree with that decision, they have an option to appeal it. And we have an independent system then, which would have to look at all of the facts and opinions that are available, and we have a second opinion, if you like. But I can assure you, Deputy, that I and my department will be rigorous in our assessment of this to ensure that we make a decision that is consistent with the law and also is consistent with protecting the environment, while at the same time considering the commercial opportunity of a proposal like this. And that's what I'm obliged to do, and I will remain independent, and that's why I will be somewhat limited in terms of what I can say in relation to the project while I'm considering this application.
Thank you, Minister. And the next topical issue is in the name of Deputy Sean Fleming and Deputy Robert Troy, and it concerns the funding allocation for housing adaptation grants, housing aid for older people and mobility aids grant scheme to Laois County Council for 2013.
Thank you for the opportunity of raising the issue of the letters that were issued by the Department of the Environment to local authorities last Friday, announcing major and severe and draconian cuts to grants for the housing adaptation grants and a number of other grants. Last year, the Department allocated approximately 55 million for this very important area, and have now announced that in fact have not announced, they sent letters to each local authority showing that they're on average going to be cut by 38%. Situation in Laois, and I want the Minister to explain why was Laois singled out for one of the worst cuts in the whole country. Last year we received from the Department an allocation of 867,000. This was cut by 76%. A cut of 76% down to a figure of 208,000 for 2013. And of course the Council provides its own 20% matching funds. These housing adaptation grants are for people with disabilities, and it helps them in terms of putting in access ramps, stair lifts, downstairs toilet facilities if they can't go up the stairs after being in hospital, accessible showers. The scheme for housing aid for older people is to help people who are living in poor housing conditions to make the necessary repairs so they can stay in their own houses, and the Mobility Aids Housing Grant Scheme is to allow people to get urgent works carried out by way of grab rails if they can't get in up and down stairs, access ramps, level access showers and stair lifts. All of these have been cut by a dramatic amount, and it's noteworthy that the letters went out last Friday to the local authorities. There will be no public announcement on this. These letters were issued within 48 hours of Minister Kathleen Lynch announcing the axing of the mobility allowance and the motorised transport grants. And we find ourselves within 48 hours of that public announcement. The Minister on this occasion chose not to issue a public announcement in relation to her decision to cut an average of approximately 40% from these grants. She merely issued a letter to local authorities, and as far as I understand, the figures are not even available across the country. Each local authority just has its own information. So I would like the Minister to consider a supplementary estimate for Laois in view of the excessive cut in County Laois at the first opportunity.
Thank you very much, Cathaoirleach. Could I just want to add my voice to this, and really to ask the Government, what exactly have they got against the older people and the people with a disability? If we go back to last summer, we witnessed people with profound disabilities camping outside government buildings in order to ensure that their personal assistance would be reinstated. Earlier last week, we saw the cut to the motorised grant and the mobility grant, and today we see a cut to the disabled persons grant, the housing adaptation grant, the mobility grant and the housing aid for the elderly grant to the various county councils. In relation to Westmeath County Council, we see a cut of over 46%, from €988,155 to €435,722 this year. Longford County Council, they see a cut of 42%. And this is despite both county councils, in their own wisdom, I want to compliment and commend the members of both county councils for putting by their allocation from limited resources to ensure that they could get the maximum possible allocation from the department to ensure that older people, people with disabilities, would be allowed to live out the rest of their lives in independence and with a sense of dignity. If you look at what these grants do, put in stair lifts, put in access ramps, put in level access showers, replace windows, replace doors, rewire houses. We're not talking about putting people in the lap of luxury. We're just talking about making sure people, elderly people, can live in dignity, making sure people with a disability can live in dignity. And can I say, in relation to this, Minister, you're going to have to revisit this situation. It's a callous cut, and I've no doubt that you're a genuine person, a genuine minister, to want to ensure that we get value for money. And you need to go back and revisit this situation, because the councils have looked at this with their limited resources, have allocated enough money so that work can be done. And can I just make the final point? Apart from the good work that they're doing for the people that benefit from them, it is a major boost to small contractors in rural areas. I know numbers of contractors who said they would have been gone out of business in the last number of years if it were not for this grant.
To respond, Minister Sullivan, in 4 minutes.
Thank you very much, Cathaoirleach, and I'd like to thank Deputies Troy and Fleming for raising the matter. As Minister with responsibility for housing, I'm very keenly aware of the challenges we face in delivering housing supports to a range of vulnerable households and groups. The difficulties facing the state's finances and the necessity to reduce public expenditure to sustainable levels are impacting on capital programmes all across the public service, and my department's housing programme is no exception. Deputies will be aware, and I think the Fianna Fáil deputies in particular should be aware of the reason why we have such reduced allocations. But the amount of capital funding available has decreased significantly in recent years, along the lines highlighted in the medium-term Exchequer Framework for Infrastructure and Capital Investment 2012 to 2016. Regrettably, these steps are necessary to bring stability to the public finances, and as a result, capital spending on housing programmes in 2013 is down on last year. But I mean, I could spend time explaining why that is, but certainly I think the last government has an awful lot more responsibility for it than anything that's been done in the current government. Unfortunately, we've been faced with a situation where our capital budgets right across the board have been cut. That said, I'm determined to make the best use of this limited budget and to target those most in need. To this end, the social housing supply initiatives are now nearly totally focused on meeting the housing needs of elderly people, people with a disability and the homeless. Around €120 million is being dedicated to this important programme in 2013. Reduced capital budgets inevitably give rise to difficult choices and decisions in allocating the available funding. In the case of new social housing supply, there are alternative supply routes through the leasing of properties to augment the smaller numbers coming from the traditional capital-funded construction programmes. Last year, over 6,000 additional social housing units were provided, taking all supply routes into account, and I'm confident that a further 5,000 will be provided this year. These difficult choices mean balancing a dwindling capital budget across a range of important areas and spreading those scarce resources in a way that meets the needs of those concerned as best we can. The capital budget needs to cover regeneration, improvements and energy retrofitting of the social housing stock, as well as adaptation grants for private housing. I am conscious too that substantial grant funding was provided for improving and adapting private houses in recent years. In the past 2 years, almost 22,000 householders benefited under the schemes. This year, I'm allocating 12.4% of the housing budget, some €34.2 million, to the grant scheme, compared to 13.2% in 2012. In allocating the available funding across all 34 city and county councils, I did so in a transparent and as fair a way as possible. Between them, local authorities currently have contractual commitments in respect of approved grants totalling €18 million. That's commitments from last year. Local authorities were always encouraged to maintain continuity in terms of approving and paying grants and commitments carried forward into the new financial year, always had first call on the available funding. This year, each authority was allocated the full amount of their contractual commitments. The balance of the available funding was allocated on the basis of each authority's share of the new applications on hand in January 2013. I believe this is a fair and equitable way of apportioning the funding, but I appreciate that this approach has resulted in lower than expected allocations for some authorities, and regrettably, Deputy Fleming, only Laois County Council reported a zero commitment in respect of contractual commitments on approved works, so that has had a major effect on the Laois allocation in particular. I accept that particular difficulties may arise in some local authorities in the course of 2013, but I have a contingency in place to deal with this. I've set aside a capital reserve of around €2 million, and I will consider applications from local authorities for a supplementary allocation once the initial allocation has been exhausted. So I hope that gives you some light at the end of the tunnel. But it was genuinely a fair way in which we allocated the money. First of all, the commitments were already there, and then on the basis of the applications that came in from the various counties.
Thank you. Just 1 minute.
Yes. 1 minute. Minister, you might help the transparency by publishing the list that went to each local authority. We haven't seen that. Secondly, in relation to County Laois, the reason they had zero commitments is because they didn't enter into commitments when they didn't know they were guaranteed the funding, and they're being penalised for being prudent. Whereas other counties are saying 18 million of commitments were entered into without a guarantee of funding, and they've got first tranche. So the responsible local authority who was clearing its waiting list and not entering into commitment has been unfairly penalised. I have spoken to your officials today, genuinely in Ballina. They're very helpful, and a letter has gone in from Laois County Council today seeking some additional funds out of the capital reserve, and I think you will understand the point. Because they were very organised in their business, they didn't have commitments that they couldn't meet, and they shouldn't be penalised for that. And I hope during the course of the year you will perhaps make good a significant amount out of that reserve. Finally, I do have to say, just the last point I have to say is, I don't accept the premises of what you say about scarce capital resources within the Department of the Environment. Last year alone, and here last week we had a vote in the Dáil, 63 million of unspent funding on water investment programme was handed back to the Department of Finance because of mismanagement of the capital budget in the Department of the Environment. Some of that should be going to these people this year.
Deputy Troy, just 1 minute.
Thank you, Cahir. But Minister, can I say slashing capital budgets is not the answer. This is at a time when you should be looking at labour-intensive projects, and these grants were a great incentive and a great stimulus to small contractors, and in terms of boost to, and many of them will say that it actually kept them in business. And can I say that it's typical of this government that you're not looking at the bigger picture. For people, disabled people, elderly people who can't get these required works done to their houses will end up in long-term nursing home care. What is that going to cost the state? €800 a week, when in some instances all these people are looking for is €2,000 and €3,000 and €4,000 to get the houses adapted to meet their needs. Minister, 2 million is simply not enough. We need you to go back to the department, and as a colleague has highlighted areas where you can look for additional resources. Because simply all we're asking is to give our elderly people, give our disabled people a sense of dignity so they can live in modest comfort for the rest of their lives.
Thanks very much, Deputy. Very briefly, Minister.
Thank you. Well, I mean, we have that contingency fund, as you said, and we certainly intend to use it in a focused way. I'm also looking at possibly reducing the upper limit of the grants, because the averages are, in some cases, only 30%, some 40%, some around 50% of the actual upper limits. So that would be a way of spreading the money around further. I'm also looking to see if we can get some kind of stimulus proposal put in place this year that would employ some of those people you're talking about, Deputy Trine. Maybe not necessarily in this particular scheme, but ways in which, for example, that we could retrofit local authority houses more extensively than we're doing now, which would ease the burden of the payment of fuel bills as well for people in some of the older local authority houses. So certainly I'm conscious of the need to stimulate employment and of the employment that actually these grants do give. But I protected the budget as well as I could, but and we did have to spread it around as well as we could. But I'd like to thank you for raising the issues, and I certainly look at the proposal by Deputy Fleming that we should put out the information for the entire country.
Thank you, Minister. The next topical issue is in the name of Deputy Angus O'Snoddig, and it's to do with the negative effects of the funding cuts to youth projects in Dublin City, which were being imposed by the City of Dublin Youth Services Board. Deputy, 4 minutes.
I think it's very important that the Minister is here to listen, and hopefully I can impress upon you to do whatever is necessary to avoid cuts to some of the projects that have been listed, and they're not all within my own constituency, but I will obviously concentrate on the projects that I know best on that. These projects in the main are in working class areas, disadvantaged areas, whichever title you want to go, but they tick all of the boxes that have always been listed as areas of major need. They're areas where the drug problem has been at its height. In the past, where there was low educational attainment, and much has been done in recent years, and that cycle is broken. But if we continue with the cuts, not only in relation to the youth services themselves, you might end up back and creating that cycle once again. It is an area in many cases of very violent crime, but it's also, these areas are often those which have severe poverty. They're impoverished in many ways, and whereas in richer areas in Dublin or more affluent areas, there might be a call, or the community might be able to call on itself to fund or to help part fund some of the projects. That is not an option in the main in most of these. Even the groups that I've worked with, they are imaginative in terms of fundraising. They have tried everything. They have sat down and looked at every single grant that is available, not only in Ireland but throughout the world. They've appealed to philanthropists to fund. So they've looked at alternative fundings. They have pared all of their overheads right down to the bone, because this isn't the first cut. This is after a series of cuts. They have, in many cases, pared back their services. They have pared back on wages and on the administration costs. So it's not as if they aren't aware of the need to be prudent in this day and age. They have done that. They have done that in buckets in many cases. Yet, they were told before Christmas to expect maybe a 3 or 4 or even a 5% cut. But some of the projects that have been listed by the City of Dublin Youth Services Board, the cuts are huge to them, because they've pared. And I'm not going to deal with two of the groups, which Focus Ireland and Candle, which are substantial, and there are major reasons for that. I do have a problem in some ways, because there is an alternative funding already in place to capture that. Maybe the Minister is looking at that herself, for the organisations. But the groups like the base, in Ballyfermot. The base in Ballyfermot has been pared, and it looks attractive, the size of the funding. But their funding has been cut back by 14%. Now, 14% doesn't sound huge if we were in an era of plenty. But when you cut basically €60,000 from a budget of an organisation which is dealing with the most disadvantaged children in Dublin 10, that is a huge cut. That means job losses, that means curtailment of services, that means closure on certain days. The same could be said the Ballyfermot Youth Service, and I know Deputy Conaghan is here, and he'd know some of the groups that I'm listing, and he'll know the effects of such a cut of 14% on the Ballyfermot Youth Service or, as I said, the base. Like 73,000 is suggested to come out of their budget. That
Deputy,
is substantial
your time is
in itself.
up now. You can come back in a moment.
How much?
Your time is up
Time
now.
is up. There's a whole range. So, Minister, I know that kind of the final decision doesn't necessarily lie with yourself, but you can sign off or refuse to sign off on what has been presented to you by the City of Dublin Youth Service Board. I urge you not to sign off on cuts of that scale and to look again to ensure that services don't end up reducing their service or reducing their hours, especially in this time for young people.
Minister, 4 minutes, just under 4 minutes, Minister.
Thank the Deputy for raising this issue of support for youth services, and I know the services that you referred to. I've been to the base in Ballyfermot, and I know the work of the Ballyfermot Youth Services, and certainly I want to support as much as I possibly can the work that has been done by youth services in Dublin and indeed throughout the country. And I recognise the value of it, and I'd like to be investing more in it if that was feasible. Just to say, in 2013 my department will provide funding of 53.173 million to support the provision of youth services and programmes throughout the country, including in particular, as you rightly say, in disadvantaged communities. And that funding supports national youth work, it supports local youth work. There's about 1,400 paid staff, there's 40,000 volunteers, and there's 400,000 young people participating in youth services and activities in Ireland. And I think, in fact, what we need to do is bring more exposure to the work that is being done and make sure that youth work is recognised for what it gives to young people in terms of continuum of services. And it certainly has a huge role to play, which I'll be focusing on during my EU presidency of the Youth Council in terms of helping young people participate in training and eventually employment as well. So I think that aspect of youth work needs to be looked at increasingly. However, like all areas of the public sector, and as my colleague before me said, the Department of Children and Youth Affairs, we have had to find savings as part of the CRE, the Comprehensive Review of Expenditure. We have to play our part in, as part of the collective government effort to reduce our unsustainable day-to-day deficit. That is the reality for my department as well as other departments. And the CRE that was published in December 2011 set out clearly the savings required for my department in each of the years, 2012, 13 and 14. And I published that along with the detail of what would happen to all of this funding over the 3-year period, and that was known to everybody involved. So I just want to make that point. When we published the review, we had a 7-page chapter outlining the savings that we did have to require from the youth work funding schemes, and it did come to close to 10%. And the administrating bodies who administer these grants on behalf of the department were notified about this, and of course would have been familiar, totally familiar with what was in the CRE for the 3-year period in question. Now, in the course of the past few weeks and months, obviously, I've met with representatives of the youth sector with a view to determining how best to minimise the impact of the reduction in the 2013 budget on youth services. Excuse me, given the challenging budgetary situation we are facing. And the administering bodies have been asked to look at issues like, and you mentioned them yourself, Deputy, they have been asked to look at issues like salary levels, they've been asked to look at conditions, administrative costs across projects and services, if these have not already been addressed. And I do want to protect, as far as possible, obviously, the frontline services that youth workers and youth services are providing to very vulnerable young people. Now, what I've also done is in order to try and maximise the use of the funding available for youth services and programmes, I have given flexibility to the local bodies who administer the grants, normally the VCs, to propose the reconfiguration of the allocations provided, having regard to the knowledge available to these bodies about the needs of young people at local level. So there is a flexibility built in to those who administer the schemes to examine each project and come back to me with recommendations. As you say, it will come back to me in the end. So it isn't within that context that last week the City of Dublin Youth Service Board, as the local grant administering body in the Dublin area, submitted a proposal to the department requesting that percentage reductions different to those outlined in the CRE would be applied to projects in the Dublin area. Now, their rationale, as they said it to me, was to minimise the disruption to services. And they said they had examined each of the projects and they'd made recommendations based on the examination of those projects. And
in their analysis, in fact, the majority of projects would receive cuts less than 10%. Many of the projects would receive cuts, for example, of 2%. And they looked particularly at the smaller projects, and they wanted to ensure they would continue because they felt they were providing a valuable service. They also said that some of the larger projects would receive greater reductions, hence the projects you mentioned, who are receiving larger funding. And I do appreciate that they have made huge efforts to manage within that funding, but that's the recommendation.
Minister, just to point out the time's actually up, but if there's a very
so if I
quick point
conclude
that you
by
want to
saying
wrap
that
up.
I'm examining the proposals that have come in from the CDYSB. My department officials met last Friday with the board, and we are examining the proposals that have come in. There is no cut at present provided for the local voluntary youth clubs, and some of the funding has also been made available, as you will see from the note that has been circulated to you, for the support of youth work this year. So I'm examining the proposals and the approach that the board have taken, and I will make a decision in relation to it
Thanks,
shortly.
Deputy. I'm afraid there's only
just in relation to the value of the services being provided.
Sorry, Deputy, I'm afraid there's only a minute left just for back and forth.
I hope that I have impressed upon you not to proceed with some of the large-scale, even though they're large-scale organisation, a cut-off 2 or 3% can be the difference between staying open one day and not. And kind of, it's not just my own area. The likes of Bradog in the North Inner City, 14% cut. The Sphere in Darndale, 122,000. That for any organisation would be huge. That means jobs will go. Jobs means kind of less services. So don't forget the cumulative effect, for instance, my own constituency is nearly 500,000 taken out, and that's not including the Focus Ireland cut. And that is substantial for youth services in a single constituency, but across the way, the whole lot. And this is on top of cuts, as I said, the child benefit, maternity benefit tax, kind of the likes of DESH, SNAs, and a whole range of others. That's where the money in the past might have been found. You might have been able to appeal to parents to pay an extra donation. They can't, and that means that the services, which in many cases have changed their work practice and everything else to accommodate change in terms of funding, they can't take any more cuts to the scale.
Minister, did you want to respond just very briefly? Yeah,
I will examine in detail the impact of the proposed changes in budget allocation, and I certainly will try to ensure that we make the most equitable possible decision in relation to the changes in funding, and we will make every effort to preserve jobs and opening hours, and we will make the decision in the most equitable way possible.
Thank you very much, Minister. And the next topical issue and last one is in the name of Deputy Michelle Mulhern, and it's the need to make provision for 2 intermediate care teams for North and South Mayo to allow for better use of acute hospital resources in the county. Deputy, 4 minutes.
Thank you, Cathaoirleach. I raise this matter today on account of a serious ongoing trolley problem at Mayo General Hospital. It's in what they call the red zone on account of it having 10 to 12 patients on trolleys on average day after day, and it can be said that the problem has been intensifying over the past year, and in fact it's getting worse. This unfortunately includes elderly people who are not fit to be left lying on trolleys, but nonetheless that's where they are. I know that this is a matter which will be of grave concern to the Minister for Health. I do want to compliment him for the campaign he has been pursuing nationwide since coming into government to eliminate this problem, and the initiative he took in setting up and funding the Special Delivery Unit to tackle the problem of people on trolleys. This state of affairs in Mayo General is even more disturbing, considering this hospital got on top of its trolley problem in 2011 with a 64% reduction of the numbers of people on trolleys, which was considerably greater achievement than the national average at that time, which was a reduction of 20%. So we can say that there is evidence and that the management know their stuff and have a track record in thinking outside the box to tackle the issue, which is exactly what the challenge that the Minister has laid down. However, the problems and the blockages that Mayo General are experiencing are being caused by external factors. And the problems are twofold. Firstly, 2012 saw a significant increase of 8% in people presenting to the A&E department, together with an 8% increase in the number of medical patients being treated in the hospital. We know the reasons for this can be attributed to a number of reasons, but one of them is that there's a 5% of these patients are actually from Roscommon, which is obviously a knock-on effect on account of the closure of the Roscommon A&E. And this represents an increase in the number of people presenting from Roscommon. Anecdotally, it would also seem that owing to the changes in the way GPs are paid, that they are doing less house calls and consequently more people are being referred to A&E. We also know that there is an increased dependency on the public health system, with less people being able to afford to pay for private health care. But far and above, the biggest problem causing overcrowding in Mayo General Hospital is in the area of delayed discharge. This is an absolutely massive problem in the hospital. This week, the average daily figure is 16 patients on delayed discharge. Last week it was 12 patients, and if you look over the previous weeks, a similar pattern is in place. These are patients who have passed their time for being in an acute hospital bed, and they should be put down in, transferred into step-down facilities. The problem is there is lack of available step-down facilities within the county. A startling statistic is that since 12 step-down beds were closed in Belna District Hospital towards the end of 2011, the number of delayed discharges at Mayo General Hospital has increased by 400%. It's a startling statistic, but nonetheless it stands. The blockages at Mayo General are chronic and urgent, and they need urgent intervention at this stage, and that's what I'm seeking here today. I want to acknowledge that 105,000 has been allocated from the Special Delivery Unit this year, and 300,000 last year to support the Acute Medical Assessment Unit, which monies were spent to good effect. Quite frankly, the monies this year, it's not sufficient to address the problem, and we need to create a situation that there are going to be more step-down facilities. I'm requesting that the HSE be directed and funded to reopen 12 beds in Belna District Hospital. It makes economic sense. A patient in a medical bed in Mayo General costs €900 per day to the state, compared to €1,000 per week at Belna District Hospital, and also step-down beds in Swinford and Belmullet District Hospitals could also be part of the solution. Also, I believe, Minister, that it is imperative that funding be made available for 2 intermediate care teams in County Mayo. This would allow patients, where appropriate, receive hospital...
Your time is way up.
Okay.
Finish the sentence.
Now? Okay. Receive hospital-style treatment in their own home, and in many cases stop these people from being admitted to hospital in the first place, and also allow for earlier discharges. So I'm seeking funding, and I'm asking for urgent intervention. The management there have proven their ability to tackle the trolley issue. There are external factors, and they need the support from the Minister and from the Department.
Thanks, the Deputy, for raising this issue. This Government is committed to ensuring that patients receive the highest standards of care in the appropriate settings, be they acute, community, primary or residential. The traditional focus on the institution rather than the patient must be changed. To this end, we support older people to live at home and in their communities for as long as possible. This is realised through a range of community-based services such as mainstream home help, enhanced home care packages, or via other supports such as Meals on Wheels and respite or daycare. The services are designed to be as flexible as possible to best meet the needs of individual recipients, their families and their carers. In order to meet increasing population needs and to deliver sustainable services within available resources, innovative models of care are required to further advance the development of equitable integrated care for older people across community-based services, intermediate care options and quality long-term residential care services, supported by a robust and well-funded scheme. The provision of intermediate care options and the provision of clear pathways of care for older persons accessing the healthcare system will continue to be developed in 2013, with specific emphasis on the provision of transitional intermediate type care to address the issue you raised, Deputy, of unnecessary admissions to acute hospitals and the requirements for long-term care. This will build on the work commenced in 2012, which saw an investment of 11 million in these type of services. The HSE Service Plan 2013 was published on January the 10th, and the HSE West Service Plan, as you know, was published on the 28th of February last. Budgets have now been allocated for each area within HSE West, and new developments are also identified in 2013 across a range of services, including, as you know, the funding of 35 million nationally for mental health, 20 million for primary care and